Hello and welcome to this recording, which is designed to give beneficiaries a guide on how to complete the application form for the Key Action 2 Strategic Partnerships for Higher Education 2017 call for applications. Please be aware that this recording is for UK applicants only. This recording will be used purely to go through the relevant application form. For information about steps that must be completed before applying, please see our written guidance available on the How to Apply page of the Erasmus Plus website. A link for this document should be available below this recording. On screen now you can see the link to the 2017 application form for Key Action 2 Strategic Partnerships in the field of higher education. Please note that this is mandatory that a partner mandate for each organisation listed as a partner in the application form is attached as an annex to the application form. This slide is to remind you of the deadline for applications under Key Action 2 Strategic Partnerships. All applications must be submitted online using the electronic eForm on our website by 11 AM UK time on Wednesday the 29th of March 2017. Please ensure you begin working on your application as soon as possible. The customer services and events team are extremely busy in the run-up to this deadline, and while we do our best to support all applicants, this may not be possible if you submit questions right before the deadline. On screen now are some useful documents that the UK National Agency recommends you look at before completing the application form, and these links will be available in the video description underneath this video. Now to begin looking at the application form. So to begin with, you have section A, which is general information. This section consists of an overview of the application form. We recommend that you read this section carefully before beginning to complete the application form itself. The next section you have is section B, which is context. This section consists of a data table containing information specific to the application being made. You should check that the pre-filled fields in dark grey correspond to the funding you are applying for, especially the call year. If the details are different to the ones that are shown on screen at the moment, you may have downloaded the incorrect application form, and would recommend that you follow the link to the application form below this recording. So just to note, all greyed out fields cannot be modified. They are pre-populated, so you should check that which field is most impacted reads as Strategic Partnership for Higher Education, and the call year should be 2017. The only section that you need to fill in section B context is the pink field here. The language used to fill in the form should always be English. You are submitting your application to the UK National Agency. That is the language that we use, so the form should be completed in English. The next section you'll be required to include is section B.1, project identification. In this section you must include information about your Erasmus Plus project title, start date and duration. The rest of the fields in dark grey will pre-fill for you when you enter your organisation's PIC code later in the application form. When selecting the project title, please ensure that it accurately reflects the nature of your project. When selecting your project start date, please note that the project start date can be anywhere between the 1st of September 2017 and the 31st of December 2017. The project duration can be anywhere between 24 and 36 months, so you just need to select the correct number of months there. Depending on the date that you choose, the project end date will automatically pre-populate. Please note that the latest end date for a project is the 31st of August 2020. You can see here some text in the applicant organisation full legal name. When you come to this section it will be blank because that information is populated from a different section of the form, but I will show you that in just a moment. The next section is the national agency of the applicant organisation. So this is for UK organisations who want to lead in a Key Action 2 application form. So that would always be, in this situation, a UK 01. If you're applying to a different national agency, you would select the relevant country from that list. But for UK lead applicants, you would apply to the UK national agency. In the next section, section C, priorities, you'll need to select the most relevant horizontal or sectoral priority according to the objectives of your project. So you'll see them for all the different sectors. Sorry, you'll see it for higher education and you'll see it for horizontal. So you've got the sector-specific and horizontal priorities there. You should choose one that is most relevant. Should you find that more than one priority addresses the objective of your project, you can select more than one. All sectors will be available, so you've got youth, vet, school, horizontal, higher education and adult ed, so you can select any of those. In total, you can select up to 3 priorities, so that's 3 including these 2 and the one at the top. Yeah, so just make sure that you choose the 3 most relevant priorities. If you want to select just 1 priority, that's absolutely fine, you can do. In the section below, you will then need to comment on the choice of your priorities and how they fit in with the objectives of your project. If you want to remove any of the priorities, you can click the minus button there. Please note that will just remove the most recent entry that you've added there. So the next section is section D, participating organisation. In advance of completing this section of the form, you must ensure that your organisation is registered on the EU login and that you've got a participant identification code. If you've already got a participant identification code, you don't need to register again. That will last you for the entire Erasmus Plus programme. So in this section, you need to provide details of the lead applicant organisation. And later in the application form, you will be asked to input information about the partners. So what you need to do is input the PIC number. So this will be blank when you get here. You need to input the PIC number and then click check PIC. As soon as you click check PIC, the section in applicant organisation here at the bottom, that will populate for you. So just check that the name associated with the PIC is correct. So all these fields will be automatically populated for you, the fields in grey and white. The ones in white aren't applicable. So you need to check that all the information is correct. If you look through the information related to your PIC and you find that anything is different, you will need to amend that through the participant portal. The UK National Agency does not manage this information. It's your organisation's responsibility to make sure that it's okay. So just remember that for D.1 applicant organisation, it would always be the lead organisation details that you input. The type of organisation should be pre-populated based on the information in the participant portal. If you are a higher education institution, please select that from the drop-down list. And again, you've got 2 more questions which are greyed out, so you can see they're populated from the participant portal. So this is your organisation a public body and is your organisation non-profit? If either of the answers to those questions are incorrect, you will need to amend that on the participant portal. Please note that if your organisation's PIC is associated to a higher education institution that holds the Erasmus Charter for Higher Education, a new section will appear under section D.1.2 and this will be called accreditation. It will be automatically populated with your organisation's Erasmus Charter for Higher Education details. The subsequent fields will then show as D.13 background and experience, D.14 legal representative and D.15 contact person. So just bear that in mind if your organisation already has the Erasmus Charter. But the PIC number I've put in is just a demo, so we don't have that Erasmus Charter showing. So we're just going to go straight on to section D.1.2 background and information. So this information in this section will inform the assessor of your organisation's capacity to manage the project and propose grant successfully. So in this section, you'll need to briefly present your organisation. So you need to give the context that the applicant organisation operates in. You should cover the scope of work, the areas of activity, as well as things such as the history of organisation, the type of organisation, the number of demographic of staff, the scope of work, areas and expertise, and any other relevant information that you think would be useful to answer that question. Going on, the next question is, what are the activities and experience of your organisation in the areas relevant for this project? What are the skills and or expertise of the key persons involved in this project? So here, you need to detail how your organisation's previous experience of delivering projects or activities or other work has built on the skills and knowledge you need for the activities you propose in this application. Please detail if this is a project format that you have delivered before. Please give details of the number of administrative, organisational and delivery staff involved in the project, detailing paid staff and volunteers and their competences or relevant experience or qualification. For less experienced partners, you can also summarise those aspects which the project would actually help to develop. The next question you have you participated in a European granted project in the last 3 years preceding this application? If you select no, you can move on to the next question about the legal representative. If you select yes, a new field will appear and you will need to complete that information with the details of your project. So Those are all free typing boxes. They're pink, so you can just type in them, no problem. If you want to add more than one project, you can click plus and you can click minus to remove any information that you've added in error. Next section, D.1.3, legal representative. Here you need to enter the details of the person who is authorised to enter into a legally binding commitment on behalf of your organisation. If your application is approved, this person will become the signatory for the project's grant agreement, and you will need to complete every field in this section. If after the submission of your application any contact details change or this person leaves the organisation, please inform us as soon as possible. So you need to complete all the fields there. If the address for the legal representative is different to that of the organisation, just tick that box there and then you can fill in the details there. Again, you'll see any white fields are not mandatory and you can leave those blank. If the address is the same, don't tick that box and just leave it as it is. Okay. The next section is D.1.4, contact person. So here we need you to enter the details of the primary and any additional contacts for the lead applicant in this project. The contact person is usually the person who is coordinating the application and additional staff members who need to be kept updated about the project. We will use these details as the first point of contact for the application and the project if it is successful. If possible, please ensure that the primary contact person is someone different to the legal representative. Again, if the address is different for the contact person, just tick that box and you can input the information there. For the lead applicant, you can add up to 3 contact people. So if you want more than one contact person, just click Add Contact Person and you can put their details in the box there. Please note that we can only contact the legal representative or contact person with information regarding your Erasmus Plus project application using the details that you provide us in the application form. If after the application submission the legal representative or contact person changes or their details change, please inform us as soon as possible. In the next section, D.2 and D.3, you'll have to provide information about the partner organisations that you need to work with. So the minimum requirement for a Key Action 2 strategic partnership is that there's 3 organisations based in 3 different programme countries. So you'll need to have the lead applicant and at least 2 partners on the application form. The process for this section and for D.3 are the same as the process for D.1, so you need to input the PIC number, click check PIC, and then this information will all be automatically populated. Again, if any of the details are incorrect, that will need to be amended by your partner in the participant portal. Again, if it's a higher education institution, you will need to choose that from the list. And then you just get the same set of questions as you did in D.1. So if it's a higher education institution, this D.2.2 will be about the accreditation, and then the next questions will follow as normal. But for all the partners, you'll have to answer a question about background and experience, what the activities and previous experience, what previous experience the partner has to help with the delivery of the project and what skills they can bring, and if the partner organisation has participated in the European Union grant in the last 3 years. The process is exactly the same as for the lead applicant. You will also need to give details of the legal representative at the partner organisation and also the contact person. Please note that for the contact person at the partner organisations, you can only have 1 contact person. At the lead applicant, you can have up to 3. Again, you will need to complete the details for the third partner, so you must have the lead applicant and a minimum of 2 other organisations from different programme countries that you can add. The process for this partner is exactly the same, so you need to comment. You need to check all the information is correct, check the accreditation is correct if relevant, provide information about background and experience, any key skills they bring to the project, and if the organisation has participated in previous European funded projects before. Again, for each partner that you add, you'll need to answer those questions and you'll need to provide details of the legal representative and the contact person for that organisation. Once you've added all the partners to your project, you'll then come to section D.4, which is associated partners. So in this section, you need to detail any partners that you'll be working with or who will be supporting you in delivering the project that may not be listed as a partner in the project. So you need to identify how they're going to contribute to the implementation of the project and any specific tasks and how they will support the dissemination and sustainability of the project. Please note that multiplier events can be held at an associated partner, but please note that if you would like that to happen, the associated partner must be mentioned in this section of the application form. Please note that associated partners do not receive their own budgets, and any costs for multiplier events at associated partners must be claimed for on behalf of an associated partner by a partner as listed in the application form. So in section E, you need to start describing your project to the assessors. So the first question is about the context and the objectives of your project, and who the target groups will be, who the target groups are for the project. You should also identify why the project should be carried out transnationally. So all projects should address the needs of the participating organisations, countries, communities and wider European aspect. You'll need to outline how this need and the objectives were identified. For example, was it through research or planning meetings? You'll need to demonstrate how students, staff and other key stakeholders such as decision makers or governors are actively involved in shaping the project proposed to ensure its relevance. Pay particular attention to the European and international aspect. So for example, you need to consider why is Erasmus Plus funding the best way to achieve these aims, and how do your proposed activities link to the objectives of the Erasmus Plus programme and the specific key action. The objectives of the project should clearly seek to address the needs you establish and be relevant to the individual participants and the organisation. The next question is, in what way is the project innovative and or complementary to other projects already carried out? So it's important to remember that Key Action 2 aims to support the development of innovative practice, enhance the quality of student and staff work, build capacity in organisations and foster strategic cooperation between higher education institutions. In this question, you should identify how this project will build on previous projects or experience within applicant organisations more widely, and any innovative aspects you will pilot. You'll need to consider how it will change practice in the organisations involved and the educational systems involved. It should be clear that this is not a standalone project. The next question, how did you choose the project partners and what will they bring to the project? Does it involve organisations that have never previously been involved in a similar project? So strong partnership is a really crucial part of the successful delivery of an international project. In this question, you'll need to detail how the partnership was formed. So was it through events or networking or something like that? You'll need to identify partners that have the least or most experience in this type of project and detail each partner's contribution in terms of the skills and experience they have that is relevant to this project. You should demonstrate that your partnership's skills and experience will ensure a successful project, or identify any gaps you will address through research, learning or consultation with experts. This is also an opportunity to highlight added value by the projects being located in being located in different countries. So why could the project and its aims and objectives not be delivered without the expertise provided by the partners involved? What will the benefit be to each of the organisations involved in the partnership, and what will each organisation contribute? Are any of the partners new to this type of project, and if so, what will this bring to the project and how will the new partners benefit? If your project includes organisations from outside programme countries, for example, countries outside Europe from partner countries, it must be clear how they bring added value to the project, e.g. by bringing new practices. If this section of the form will be really rigorously assessed, so you need to make it really clear. If you are adding organisations from partner countries, which are countries outside Europe, you must clearly demonstrate what the essential added value is that they bring and why this role can have been filled by a European university. If your application is assessed and the partner is not deemed as eligible, your entire application form will be deemed as ineligible. So I would consider carefully before adding organisations from outside Europe, and if you do, make sure that you have a very clear idea of how it is that they bring essential added value to the project. Next question is, how will the task and responsibility be distributed among the partners? So here you need to consider who will take the lead for different elements of the project, and consider, will some partners have more responsibility than others, and why have you chosen this method? The next question will ask you about the most relevant topics addressed by your project. So this is quite an extensive list that you can choose from here. I don't believe there's a limit to how many you can choose, but you have to make sure that the topics are, as relevant as they can be to the project that you're trying to apply for. If you want to add another or more relevant topics, just click that plus button and then select it from the drop-down list. If you want to remove something, just click that minus button and it will remove the most recent addition to that list. And the final question of this section is what results are expected during the project and on its completion. So the results are the outputs of your project during the partnership and on completion. So what you will produce or the immediate changes you hope to effect. So for example, changes in individuals or organisation, integration of best practice into the curriculum, changes to policy, or an increase in entrepreneurial skills. Please note that this section overlaps with later sections, so consider carefully whether your results are intellectual or events. These might fit better in other sections. You will also need to consider impact when you are completing the answer to this question. Okay, in the next section, E, you will be asked about the participants in your project. So a key theme of the Erasmus Plus programme is impact, and in this section you should demonstrate how your project will reach and benefit people who are not directly associated to the organisations receiving funding under this project. The first question asks you to briefly describe how you will select and involve participants in the different activities of your project. So the project leads and the partners are responsible for selecting the participants, staff and students to take part in project activities to achieve the best overall project outcomes. The selection process must be fair, transparent and coherent, and the profile of participants must correspond to the eligibility criteria set out in the 2017 programme guide. In this question you should define the selection procedure. If you will target a certain demographic, you should comment on this here. Moving on, you'll now be asked about participants with fewer opportunities and whether or not your project involves participants facing situations that makes their participation more difficult. This is a yes or no question drop down. If you select no, you should move on to the next question. If you select yes, new questions will appear. If you select yes, you will need to input a numerical value of how many participants fall into the category of participants with fewer opportunities, so just a numerical value there. And then underneath you'll need to select from the drop-down list what kind of situations these participants are facing. So just choose your different ones from the list there. I don't think there's a limit on how many situations you can list, but if you wanted to add, you can just click the plus. If you wanted to remove, then you can just click the minus and it will remove the most recent entry. You will then need to comment on how you are going to support these participants as part of your project. So you're going to have to describe things such as relevant adjustments, additional preparation or support during the activity or follow-up these participants require in addition to your plans for the rest of the participants. This could be things like training, venue requirements, use of technology or specialist support staff. In the next question, you will be asked about the wider audience that will be affected by your project. So this question is approximately how many persons not receiving a specific grant or benefit from or will be a target of activities organised by the project. In this box you'll need to enter a numerical value, so just type in the numbers. And then underneath you are going to have to describe how and in which activity these people from the wider audience will be involved in the project. So here you should provide a narrative explaining how the persons identified in the previous question will be involved or impacted by your project. You should provide a narrative description of the people or groups of people identified in the previous question and where possible provide numerical estimations. Okay. In the next section you will be asked about the preparation of your project. So the first question is please describe what will be done in preparation by your organisation or group and by your partners before the actual project activities take place. So this section concentrates on project management and planning. Your proposal should demonstrate that all phases of your project, including the preparation phase, have been properly considered in order for your project to reach its objectives. Any preparation activities should be clearly defined and be relevant to your proposal. Please outline a planned preparation phase as necessary and relevant to the proposed activity. If you refer to our written guidance, the link to which is below this video, you can have a look at the list of things that we would maybe recommend that you include in this section if you would like a little bit more guidance. Next is section G, which is your project management and implementation section of the form. So here you'll be asked a number of questions about how you actually plan to implement the project. So the first one is, please provide detailed information about project activities that you will carry out with the support of the grant requested under the item project management and implementation. So this should cover the activities that is covered by this grant type, and you need to give details of those activities. So this is things like how the project management will work, such as the planning, the finance, the coordination, communication between partners. If you plan to have any small-scale learning, teaching, training materials developed, that would fall under this budget category, and you should detail that here. If you've got any virtual cooperation and local project activities, please describe them here. You'll need to request funding for that under the Project Management and Implementation Budget tab. There is more information about this in the programme guide, the 2017 programme guide, and also in our written guidance. So if you'd like some more information, please do refer to those two documents. The next question you asked about the methodology for your project. So in this question you need to demonstrate a project methodology which is well suited to your objectives and outputs. So you'll need to consider how your activities will be organised and who will manage and lead them. You'll need to consider how responsibility for the different activities will be divided between partners, taking into account their individual strengths. You will need to complete a timetable of activities giving a rough idea of how these responsibilities will be split, and upload it as an annex to your application form. You're next asked about the transnational project meetings. How often do you plan to meet? Who will participate? Where will they take place? And what will be the goal? So applicants can include transnational project meetings as part of the Strategic Partnerships project. These meetings should only be used by project coordinators from participating partners for coordination and implementation purposes. Please do not confuse transnational project meetings with learning, teaching, training activities, and you must be able to justify the need for these meetings in terms of the number of meetings and participants involved. You should only apply for transnational project meetings where virtual cooperation such as Skype or online video chat cannot replace face-to-face meetings. Next question, how will you communicate with and cooperate with your partners? So cooperation and communication are really central to the success of your project delivery. Here you're going to have to show how all the partners will communicate, how you will work together on activities, and how you will communicate with other important stakeholders who should be identified as far as possible. Here you'll need to include details of planned transnational project meetings, including when they take place and who will participate. You need to demonstrate that each meeting is necessary and cost-effective as compared with other means of communication and coordination. The next question is about budget control and time management. So here you must explain how your project will ensure cost-effectiveness and value for money in activities and results. Is the grant request realistic for good quality implementation of the planned activities? The work programme should demonstrate a well-planned, realistic timetable for the duration of the proposal. The next question is, how will the progress, quality and achievement of your project activities be monitored? So in this section it relates to quality assurance during the project. So you need to consider things like, how will you evaluate the progress against your milestones as the project progresses? Who will be the key staff? What will be their responsibilities? And what is their experience in monitoring or evaluation? Preparation, implementation, evaluation and dissemination will need to be completed by the project end dates, and here you will need to list appropriate monitoring and evaluation activities, including methods, tools, staff with appropriate skills and knowledge to conduct these activities that will be undertaken at critical stages in the project. Here you will need to demonstrate how these activities will ensure successful project delivery and measure how the needs have been addressed along with appropriate learning outcomes and impact measures. Please explain why it is relevant to perform these activities daily, weekly, monthly, etc. Next question asks about how you will evaluate the extent to which the project has achieved the results and objectives, and what indicators you will use to measure the success of the project. And this relates to the evaluation of results and outputs. So you need to consider things like, how will you measure the success of your project? What key quantitative and qualitative indicators of achievement will you put in place to measure progress against your overall objectives and targets? And what monitoring and evaluation activities will you undertake to check that you have reached your target? Who will be responsible for this? If you have not yet developed your indicators, you should say how you will do so. The proposed methodology should be realistic and appropriate for reducing the expected results. Consider things like how will consistency between objectives, activities and results be measured? Are the proposed activities the most appropriate to address the aims and objectives? In the next question, you'll be asked about handling risks that might occur during the project. So please list the possible key risks that could occur during the project relating to content, nature of activity, the nature of activities planned, participants' needs, and things like that. You'll need to talk about these in relation to a control measure proposed to minimise the likelihood and/or impact of the risk. You'll need to detail measures to ensure good cooperation, such as partnership agreements or code of conduct. You can outline those here, and you should note any agreed process for mediating disputes or disagreements. And the final question under this section for project management and implementation is about the online platforms. So dissemination is a really key part of Key Action 2, strategic partnerships, and online platforms are a really good way of disseminating. It's also useful for the preparation and the implementation of your project as well. So if applicable, please indicate which online platforms you intend to use. It may be the case that you've read the question and you think that none of those online platforms that have been mentioned would be applicable for you, but I'd like to take this opportunity to remind you that it is compulsory to upload final project results on the Erasmus Plus project results platform. You can also use the Erasmus Plus project results platform to find ideas for your project. It's a very good resource for kind of sharing best practice and pooling ideas. The next section is going to ask you about the intellectual outputs that you plan to include in your project. So the first question is yes or no. The form will appear like this at first, so just choose yes or no. If you choose no, the section will be blank and you can move on to the next section, G.2. If you choose yes, you will need to input the information about the intellectual output here. So in this section, you will need to input all the fields that are pink. The grayed out field, the output identification will be automatically populated, and that is how the intellectual outputs will be identified throughout your application form. So you need to select a relevant output title that will accurately reflect the piece of work that you're developing. You need to do a description of the output, including the expected impact, transferability potential, and elements of innovation. You'll also need to give a description of how work will be divided across the partner organisations. You'll need to give the start and end date, so give a rough idea of how long you think it will take to develop this intellectual output. Please note that that must start and finish within the actual project start and end dates. You can list the languages that this intellectual output will be developed in. If you want to click to add, just click the plus button and then select from the list. To remove, click the minus button and it will remove the most recent entry. The same will apply for the media, so you can list as many as you want to reflect the medias that you're going to develop this intellectual output in. Again, if you want to remove something, you can click minus. To add, you just click the plus button. Onto intellectual outputs, there is an organisation that would lead the activity, so you need to select from this drop-down list which one it would be, and then any organisation that would be assisting, just participating in the intellectual output as well, but not taking the lead. If you want to add more than one output, just click that Add Output button, and then you can put in as many as you like. The next section is G.2 multiplier events. So again, it's a drop-down list, yes or no. If you select no, you can move on to the next section, which is G.3 learning, teaching, training activities. If you plan to include multiplier events, you must click yes. Please note that multiplier events are only eligible for organisations that are developing intellectual outputs. The aim for multiplier events is to disseminate the intellectual outputs that you've developed as part of your project. So if you don't have any intellectual outputs, you can't have any multiplier events. So if you select yes in response to do you plan to include multiplier events in your project, you will need to complete the information about the multiplier event you plan to hold. So in this section, much as before, the only field that would be pre-populated is the event identification, grayed out, so you can't type in there. All the other pink fields in this section you will need to complete. So a relevant event title, the country of venue, the event description, start and end date. Please note the multiplier event must occur within the actual project dates itself. It can't start before the start of the project and it can't end after the project. You will need, because multiplier events relate to the dissemination of intellectual outputs, you're going to have to select the intellectual output that it relates to. Now, in this circumstance, I've only got the one intellectual output, but you might have 5 or 6. So you need to select from the drop-down list the most relevant intellectual outputs. If you plan to cover more than one intellectual output at the multiplier event, you can just click the Add button and then select it from there. Obviously, you will have more options when you complete the form. You then need to choose which organisation will be leading the activity and any other participating organisations in the activity. Please note that for multiplier events, you can hold the multiplier event in one of the countries listed as a partner in the project, at the seat of an institution of the European Union, or in the country of any of the associated partners which were outlined in section D.4, associated partners. If the associated partner is not listed in section D.4, you cannot have multiplier events there, so it's really important that you detail those associated partners in the relevant section. The next section of the form is D.3 and it relates to learning, teaching, training activities for the project. So you'll need to select from the drop-down list whether or not you plan to include learning, teaching, training activities. If it says, if the answer is no, you can move on to the next section, which is H, and that's follow-up. If it's yes, you should click yes, and you'll need to fill in the relevant sections. In the following sections, you'll need to answer some questions about the learning, teaching, training activities that you plan to include. So you'll need to detail the added value that these learning, teaching, training activities bring to the project and how they will help to achieve the project objectives. You will then need to list all of the learning, teaching, training activities that you're planning to include. So I've listed here a long-term teaching assignment. Make sure that you input the number of participants, the country of venue, any participants with special needs and accompanying persons. Please note that because this is a long-term teaching assignment, you will be requested to put the duration in months rather than days. And then you need to list all of the participating organisations. I've listed there as well a short-term joint staff training event just to show you the difference in the way the form appears. So again, you need to give a description, the country of venue, the number of participants, any participants with special needs and the accompanying persons. You'll notice here that the duration in months is grayed out, so you can't type in there, but you can submit the number of days. The reason for that is because it's a short-term placement, so really the duration should be measured in days. It is important to note that learning, teaching, training events can only take place in the country of one of the named partners or at the seat of an institution of the European Union. So do bear that in mind when you're planning your learning, teaching, training events. After you've provided an outline of your learning, teaching and training events, you're going to have to answer some narrative questions about them. So you're going to have to provide details about how you're going to select, prepare and support participants and ensure their safety. So here you're going to need to outline any training plan for participants, and this should detail what training will be provided, when and by whom. Please include not only task-based training, but to ensure participants' safety and ability to engage with activities, but provide adequate support for intercultural and linguistic learning expected. Preparation could include activities such as linguistic training, virtual mentoring, and/or collaboration with partner schools, partner organisations, briefings, pre-departure assessments, or domestic training. You should outline the risks you identify in this project in relation to task, participants, location, as well as your plans for mitigating these risks to ensure the safety of all involved. In this section of the application, you should also discuss your organisation's emergency procedures and a code of behaviour for participants. Please also provide evidence. Please provide evidence of your plans for obtaining suitable insurance for participants and managing any additional visa requirements and legal aspects too. The final question of this section asks about the arrangements for recognition or validations that you will give for the participants of these learning, teaching, training activities. So here you'll have to indicate how the learning outcomes for these learning, teaching and training activities will be recognised and validated, and if appropriate, which European or national mechanisms will be used to do this. Recognition is a really important part of Erasmus+, so it's really important that you outline your recognition procedures in this section of the form. In the next section of the form, you will need to comment on the impact of your project. So impact assessment is the process of examining the effect of Erasmus Plus activity on individuals, organisations and society. The effects could be positive or negative, intentional or accidental, short or long term. We have developed our own Impact Plus exercise to help applicants and projects think about their impact, and you can find it on our key resources page along with other useful documents and links. In this section, you should discuss how your Erasmus Plus project will or may have an impact on the following. So this would include learners, staff, the whole organisation or institution, the local community, the wider network, and contribute to Erasmus Plus, the Erasmus Plus programme and European Union objectives. You should explain the expected outcome for participants. Examples could include improved knowledge, newly acquired or developed skills, and changes in attitude and behaviour. These outcomes may have a further impact on their employment status, role delivery, and ability to access further education, well-being, or lifestyle. Please note the most relevant and realistic outcome for your project. Aside from the impact on individuals, you should discuss the impact you expect the project to have on your organisations and learners. This could take many forms, so it could be maybe changes in management structure or curriculum content, or having more engaged staff or something like that. You should include an estimate in terms of quantity, how many people the organisation intends to reach through implementing the project. So the next question is, what is the desired impact of the project at local, regional, national, and what is the desired impact of the project at local, regional, national, European and or international levels? So in this question, you'll need to consider the likely scope of your project and describe the desired impact at the local levels and beyond. Please be clear where the impact will be the strongest. Depending on the size and scope of your project, you should show how many innovations may have impact on systems or policies and how it may connect with other Erasmus Plus or EU activity. And the final question of this section is, how will you measure the previously mentioned impact? So how will you know whether you have achieved the expected impact? In this section, please describe the means you will use, and if known at this stage, your indicators of achievement or how you will develop them. You may choose to measure impact both within the period of EC funding and after the funding is completed. For more information about assessing impact and useful resource, please visit the impact section of the Erasmus Plus website. So the next section, section H.2, relates to the dissemination and use of project results. So the Erasmus Plus programme has a renewed interest in dissemination, and your application should have a plan in place to share the outcomes of the project. A good dissemination plan will share the results and outputs of the project, not just inform people that the project has taken place. So you have a number of different questions to answer. The first one regards the target groups. So what will be the target groups of your dissemination activities inside and outside your partnership? So here you'll need to explain your choice of target audiences, and these might include your own organisation's the beneficiaries of your activities, stakeholders, decision makers, the press and the general public. In the next question, you will be asked what activities you will carry out in order to share the results of your project. So here you should describe the activities you intend to carry out, linking them to your project activities and outputs. You should also describe the means and channels you will use, how you will monitor your dissemination activities, and please also include a timetable for activity, including any monitoring. If relevant, explain how your plans might change in line with the changing needs of the target groups and other aspects of the external situation. When you're answering these questions, please consider the appropriateness of the dissemination method based on the different profiles of your target groups. And you should include like I said, a timetable, but it's just a rough timetable to give an idea of how the project will actually work. The next question asks who will be responsible for the dissemination activity within your partnership and which specific expertise do they have in this area. So here you are asked to explain which partners will undertake the dissemination activities, what expertise they will bring, and what resource you will make available to implement the plans described in this section. The next section relates to making materials from the project available to wider sources. So this relates to the Erasmus Plus open access requirement for all materials developed through its project, which means that once you've produced these outputs, they need to be free for people to access to the public, and there should be access to a digital format for this material. So you need to show how you plan to do this. So just describe your plans for ensuring that the material your project produces is open for wide and free distribution and access. Please note that that question about open access requirement you'll notice that it's in white, or it might show as yellow on your computer. The reason for that is because it's not mandatory. It's not mandatory because not all projects will have intellectual outputs. However, if you have created intellectual outputs as part of your project, you must answer this question and you must comment on how you will make those intellectual outputs freely available. Then you have to answer how will you ensure that the project's result will remain available and will be used by others. So you need to consider things like how will you make sure your results are widely available in the long term. So for example, giving open access to any resources that you have developed, or making sure innovation becomes integrated into the practice of different organizations. The final question of this section is optional. So in this section, you're asked to provide any other information you consider appropriate to give a full understanding of your dissemination plan and its expected impact. So this might include, for example, giving more detail about open access resources you've developed, or making sure innovation becomes integrated into the practice of different organizations. If you don't have any other comments to add, you don't need to answer that question, but if you do have more information about your dissemination plan, then please do provide them in that section. So the next question relates to the sustainability of your project. So sustainability can be interpreted as the continuation of the project activities, outcomes and impact after the Erasmus Plus funding is finished. Sustainability includes, but is not confined to, further financing of activities. It can also refer to the integration of results and innovation into the management or pedagogy of participating organisations and way in which new curricula, etc. will be updated. So there's only one question in this section, and it is, what are the activities and results that will be maintained after the end of EU funding, and how will you ensure the resources needed to sustain them? So here, please explain which aspects of your project you will plan to maintain after funding finishes, how will you do this, and what resources, including financial resources, will you use to ensure sustainability. You may wish to refer to your dissemination activities and the use of results described in the previous section. Okay, the next section of the form relates to budget under section I. It's just to let you know that the Erasmus Plus grant is intended as a contribution to your project costs and may not cover the total cost of your project. And an EU grant is an incentive to carry out a project which would not be feasible without this financial support, and is based on the principle of co-financing. Co-financing means that the EU grant may not finance the entire cost of the project, and therefore the project must be funded by sources of co-finances other than the EU grant. When you're applying for Key Action 2, the total grant is made up of a different menu of budget items, and you may be eligible to receive funding for the following budget categories. So this includes project management and implementation, transnational project meetings, intellectual outputs, multiplier events, special needs support and exceptional costs. And then you have the subsection of learning, teaching, training activities, and for those you can claim for travel, individual support, linguistic support and exceptional costs. If you would like any more information about the different budget categories beyond this recording, please do take a look at our written application guidance, as it goes into quite a lot of detail for you. But to begin with, we have the section I.1, Project Management and Implementation. Project management and implementation is based on a monthly grant that is paid to each participating organisation. So this is €500 to the lead applicant per month and €250 to the other partners. This section of the eForm will automatically populate according to the number of participating organisations and project duration. Please check carefully and validate before moving on to the next section. Please note that these funds are not paid into the bank account of the beneficiary monthly. They are incorporated into the grant total, which is subjected to a pre-financing and final payment schedule. For projects involving more than 10 partners, the monthly grant is limited to the equivalent of 10 participating countries. Next, you've got the transnational project meetings. So transnational project meeting, the budget for this is an amount paid as a contribution towards travel and assistance for project meetings between partners hosted by one of the participating organisations. Grants for this are paid according to a contribution to unit cost per participant to cover travel and subsistence, with a different contribution to unit cost for short and long distance travel. So please note that this budget section is only for the travel of people to attend transnational project meetings. This budget cannot be used to fund the travel associated with the actual implementation of any learning, teaching, training activities. So you need to select the PIC of the sending organisation and the country of the organisation, the number of participants that will be sent, and the distance band. Please use the European Commission's distance band when you are calculating this. The distance band that you choose will affect the grant that you have per participant. So just make sure that you select the correct distance band when you do that. If you select the incorrect one, it's too high, then we will reduce it as a national agency. So just make sure you check that with the distance band calculator. And just check as well that the grant per participant, when you multiply it by the number of participants, reflects the grant requested figure accurately as well. To add more transnational project meetings, you can click this plus button here or click the minus button there. In the next section, which is I.3, you will need to detail information about intellectual outputs. So in this section, you will need to detail the PIC of the organisation that will be working on the output. You need to select the intellectual output that you are referring to. I've only got one on my form, but you may have many, so make sure that you select the correct one from the drop-down list. And then you need to select the category of staff. So you can see there's different options here, and depending on the category of staff, the grant amount will change. So for example, the administrative staff get 131 euros a day, but the managers get 280 euros a day. When you're selecting the category of staff for this, it is really important that you remember that you need to select the category of staff for the work that they will be doing on the intellectual output, not the job that they do on a day-to-day basis. So if you've got, I don't know, a professor who would normally be considered a manager, if you have a professor who's providing a sort of administrative role on the output, so for example they're just typing up some information or something like that, you would claim that as administrative support staff time. So it's really, really important to remember that the category of staff that you choose depends on the role that the staff member will have within the intellectual output, not the role that they have on a day-to-day basis. If you have any questions about that, please contact the national agency and we can advise you. It's really important that you claim that correctly, because if you don't, it could be considered ineligible. If you want to add more staff costs relating to the intellectual outputs, you can do so using the plus or minus button there. Obviously, if you have more than one organisation working on an intellectual output, you will need to put a few rows in there to reflect that. Okay, so the next section is for multiplier events. So before we go into looking into how you fill this section in, just bear in mind that multiplier events are only applicable to projects supporting innovation that include intellectual outputs as part of the project. The grant support for multiplier events is limited to a maximum of 30,000 euros per project, regardless of its duration, and costs for multiplier events can only be claimed by one partner named in the project. Please note that it is not possible to claim travel and subsistence costs for individuals representing organisations that are listed as partners or coordinating organisations of the Erasmus Plus project. Travel and subsistence costs for participants from partner organisations could be paid from the Programme Management and Implementation budget category, or it could be seen as a self-contribution of the partner organisation themselves. So it's really important to remember with these multiplier events that the aim is to disseminate the intellectual output beyond the organisation, beyond those partners involved in the project. So you can only claim for people to attend that come from outside the organisation. You'll notice as well here that you have a different grant rate. So you've got a grant rate for a local participant from the same country in which the multiplier event is being held, and then you've got a different grant rate for foreign participants to obviously help contribute to their travel. Please make sure that you select the relevant event identification from the list. I only have one, but you may have more than one, so please make sure that you check you're selecting the correct one. The country or venue will be populated based on the information that you put in the previous section relating to multiplier events. Just remember that for multiplier events, they could be held in the country of an associated partner, in the country of one of the partners named in the application form, or in one of the seats of the European Parliament. For more information about multiplier events, please take a look at our written guidance. Okay, and the next section you have to complete is the budget about the learning, teaching, training activities. So they do have their own separate budget. So this is only for individuals who are undertaking learning, teaching, training activities. And you need to indicate the travel. So the participants will have different travel grants. And so you'll see here that you've got the individual support table split up into two. So you've got the long-term teaching training activities and the short-term teaching and training activities. And this will depend on the activity type that you chose when you were listing learning, teaching, training activities into the previous section. So if we take a look at the travel section, there's only one travel section. It doesn't matter if it's long-term or short-term. You need to select the pick of the organisation, where the individual is being sent from, which activity number it relates to. So you can find that information into the learning, teaching, training activities section that you populated previously. The activity type will be automatically populated. You must select the relevant distance band according to the European Commission's distance band calculator. Input the number of participants, including any accompanying persons. And then what you need to do is, from 2016, there's a top-up for expensive domestic travel cost. So what this means is that as long as it's duly justified in the application form, a participant can be entitled to receive a top-up for expensive domestic travel. This only applies to domestic travel costs over €225 per return trip, and provided that the costs are motivated and well justified in the application form. If you would like a definition of what expensive domestic travel is considered at, please take a look in our written application guidance. You can claim up to 2 of these top-ups for each participant. So if you wanted to claim 1 top-up for each participant, you would put 8 there, so it reflects the fact that there's 1 top-up for each participant. If you would like to request 2 top-ups for each participant, you would multiply the number of participants by 2 and type that number in there. The grant requested will then update accordingly. You can then add any other instance of travel for any other learning, teaching and training events that you might have listed previously in the form. So, to remove, you click the minus button as per usual. Okay. The next section of the budget category is the individual support for learning, teaching, training activities. So you've got the section for the long-term learning, teaching, training activities, and also the table for short-term learning, teaching, training activities. And they will be divided up according to the information that you provided previously in the application form. So you'll need to select the organisation, the participating organisation, and the activity number that it relates to. The country of destination, it can only be one of the organisations listed in the application form. The duration per participant would have to be in months because it's a long-term training event, and this should match the duration that you put in the previous section about learning, teaching, training activities. Input the number of participants without accompanying persons. That grant per participant that's grayed out there here will be calculated automatically. You now need to input the duration for accompanying persons and the number of accompanying persons. Once you've input all that information, it will calculate the grant for you for that particular learning, teaching, training event, which in this case is a long-term teaching assignment. After you've done that, you need to put in the short-term learning, teaching, training event if you have any. So you need to put the name of the organisation. If you choose the wrong organisation, the activity number will not appear in that drop-down list. Only when you choose the correct one will it show like that. So again, the activity type will be automatically populated. Because it's a short-term activity, the duration is days. So the minimum duration is 5 days, so I'm going to put 7 in. So the number of participants, remember the grant per participant will be automatically calculated when you finish this table. And the number of accompanying persons per day. Sorry, the number of days of accompanying persons and the number of accompanying persons themselves. Once you put all that information in, it will calculate it in the total grant requested field there. The next section of the budget relates to linguistic support. So a flat rate of €150 for linguistic support is paid to each participant in long-term mobility, and that's only for activities lasting between 2 and 12 months per participant. Linguistic support is available for eligible participants to improve their knowledge and the language of instruction or work. So in this section, it's very much similar to the previous sections. You need to click Add to add a row. Select the sending organisation that the participants will be coming from. Select which activity number it relates to. So remember that only the long-term activities will show in this section because linguistic support is only eligible for long-term activities. The activity type will automatically populate, and then you need to input the number of participants who will be receiving the linguistic support fund. The application form will then multiply the number of participants by €150 per participant and complete the table for you there. The next section is the exceptional costs for overseas countries and territories. So this is a contribution to the expensive costs of individuals that need to come from overseas countries and territories. And you just need to enter the number, you need to enter the PIC number of the affected organisation, the activity number that it relates to. You can have it for long or short-term assignments. The number of participants affected. You need to provide a very clear explanation of and the reason why you are requesting these costs. You need to provide that there. If you don't provide that explanation, you will not be awarded the funding for this. And then the grant requested up to 80% of the eligible cost. So if you think that the individual will have to spend an additional €1,000 to get to where they need to go, you would calculate 80% of that and then input it in the box. So 80% of 1,000 is 800, and you would just type it in that box there. You can do this for as many individuals that you feel that you need to request for, but please make sure that you clearly justify that in the application form. Next is special needs. So special needs support must be applied for at the time of application and cannot be retrospectively applied for. So again, you need to select the organisation in which the relevant individual is enrolled or where they work. For each organisation, you need to identify the number of participants with special needs. So you need to do that for every organisation. So for each organisation, just add a row using this plus sign here. You need to give a description of the type of support that the student needs. Obviously, you give a bit more detail than that, so I was thinking maybe arthritis would mean that they'd need additional funding for perhaps transport or something like that, so you provide as much detail as you can. And then again, you would need to give a rough idea of how much the student would need or the participant would need in order to help them with their placement. So these are based on real costs, and at the final report you will be asked to provide evidence and receipts for these costs. So you need to work out how much you think, how much additional funding this individual needs, and type it in the box there. Please remember that all of the figures in this application form are reflected in euros. The final section of the budget category is the exceptional costs. So the awarding of exceptional costs is not a given, and when adding exceptional cost items, clear and full justification must be given in the text box below. You must also justify it in appropriate areas of the application form. Please also itemize and explain all exceptional costs clearly. So exceptional costs are based on actual costs and must be supported by invoices and receipts at final report. Please clearly reference the section of the eForm where justification is given for exceptional costs that are being requested. Please before requesting exceptional costs, check whether the cost cannot be covered under any other budget categories, such as project management and implementation. Exceptional costs can only be requested if they are critical to the success of the project and are services, goods or items that cannot be provided by the organisations involved in the project. Clear justification must be given within the application form that these conditions have been met. Exceptional costs, if eligible, can provide up to a maximum of 75% of the real costs of services, goods, items that would have to be contracted or procured by the project. So for this you need to list the organisation that requires the exceptional costs. You need to provide an outline of the costs in this box here. You need to provide as much information as possible. If the costs are not clearly justified, you will not be awarded and they will be removed from the application form. And then you reflect 75% of the total cost that you need. So say you needed, I don't know, a set of recording equipment, and it's €1,000, you would put €750 in there to reflect 75% of the cost. If you have any other information that you wanted to provide about the budget, there is a box at the bottom there. It's not mandatory, but really it only benefits you if you provide more information, so please do complete that section if necessary. Okay, the next section is section J, which is your project summary, and here your organisation must provide a well-written, comprehensive summary of your project within the application. Project summaries must be written in plain, clear English and be free from jargon. This is of particular importance as it provides a description of the project to the general public and may be used in European Commission or national agency documents. The summary will also be included on the Erasmus Plus project results platform. It is important to be concise and clear and cover at least the following points. So you need to provide context or background of the project, objectives of the project, number and profile of participants, description of activities, the methodology to be used in carrying out the project, and a short description of the results and impact envisaged and the potential longer-term benefits of the project. The next section, section J.1, gives you a summary of the information that you've put in on the form. So the first one is a summary of the participating organisation, and these would have been the organisations that you input in section D. If any of the information in this section is incorrect, please go to section D and amend it accordingly. Next, you've got section J.2, which is budget summary, and this is a table providing an overview of the activity number, activity type and grant requested for the project. It just shows you how much each organisation has requested. When I was filling in the form, I seemed to put the one pick quite a lot, but obviously yours would be spread out a lot more evenly. Yeah, so just check that everything there reflects your project correctly. If any of that information is incorrect, you need to go back to the budget section, section I, to amend that. And then section J.2.1 is the project total grant, and this pre-populated table contains the total combined grant requested for the project. It is imperative that you check this amount is correct against your own calculation and resolve any issues before submitting your application form. We cannot fund any activities retrospectively that are not applied for at the application stage. Next is the checklist. So before submitting the application, please use the checklist to make sure that your application fulfills all of the requirements listed. We don't need to see a copy of this checklist. It's only for your organisation's reference to help you make sure that you have included everything that you need. So please don't submit that to us. We don't need it by post or as an annex to the form, just for your reference. The next section is the data protection notice, and applicants are required to read the data protection notice in advance of signing the Declaration of Honour. The next is the Declaration of Honour. So the first page of this section just gives information about what you're actually agreeing to when you sign the Declaration of Honour, and then the second page contains the Declaration of Honour itself. You can print the Declaration of Honour by clicking the button Print Declaration of Honour, and this Declaration of Honour needs to be signed by hand by the legal representative that was named for the lead applicant. We do not need the Declaration of Honour for the partner organisations, only the lead applicant. Okay. So once that's completed, you'll need to take a scan, and then you'll need to attach it as an annex. The annexes section is just below here. You can add up to 10 annexes, I believe, up to a maximum of 240 kilobytes. So you just click the add button here and then go to the relevant form within your computer to add the annex. The Declaration of Honour. So you'll need the Declaration of Honour signed by the lead applicant legal representative. You'll need a partner mandate for each of the partners listed in the application form. That includes the lead applicant and partner organisations. And also you'll need a timetable of activities giving a rough outline of how you plan the events to actually take place within the project. Next is the submission section of the application form. So in this section you can check to see, first of all, that your application form is valid, and you can do so by clicking the validate button here. You'll notice that that's flagged up an error message. So if I click OK now, it will take me to the field that is not completed. So you can go to the relevant section and then complete the information there, and then go back down to the bottom. There is a validate button on the page at the bottom of every page, so you can validate it as you go through as well if you'd like. When you click validate, if the form is valid, it will say the form is valid. Within that error message, it will pop up a box and it will say the form is valid, and then you can proceed. So make sure you click validate until all the issues with your application form have been sorted out. You won't be able to submit it until the form is considered as valid. To submit the application form, you must be connected to the internet, and you do so by clicking submit online, this button by here. We don't need a copy of your application form by post. We only need a copy of it to be submitted online. If you have any issues submitting your application form by the deadline, you have 2 hours to let us know. This is due to technical errors that are caused by the design of the application form itself, not due to technical errors with your network, for example. If you want to see technical errors and the ones that we will accept as part of the alternative submission procedure and the ones that we will not, please do take a look in our written guidance, as we cover that information in a lot of information. But if you get an error message that is not covered under the list of unacceptable error messages in our written guidance, let us know within 2 hours following the deadline, and give us a copy of the form, any attachments that you had, and also a snapshot of the submission summary showing the error message, and we will then get back to you. When you submit your application form online, the submission summary will say the form has been submitted successfully, and it will give you a table in there which will say submission successful. If you have any problems with that, do let us know. And then the final section of the form is form printing. So if you click that button there, print form, you can print a copy of your application form. We would recommend that you do that to keep it for future reference, because you might need to know this information in future calls. So that was our look at the Erasmus Plus application form for Key Action 2 Strategic Partnerships in the Field of Higher Education for the 2017 call. We do have a help desk, the details for which are on screen now. If you've got any questions, please do contact us. If you've got kind of more in-depth, longer question, please do register for one of our one-to-one support calls. The reason for that is that the help desk is designed to help all key actions under higher education. So if it's time-consuming, question, it would be easier to deal with in the dedicated time, but by all means do feel free to contact us. It only remains for me to thank you for listening and to wish you best of luck with your application form.